Bonjour, and today we're covering le passé composé in French of the indicative mode. Are you ready? Because there's something I want to tell you today. Is that on the face of it, French and English, of course, are different, but the differences are more subtle than it first seems. And I want to go and study those differences with you today in the case of the study of that tense. And now, you already know that these two languages differ in many aspects. Sentence structures, conjugation system, and so on and so forth. And it is, of course, the case today again. So we're zooming in on the passé composé today. And now if you're ready and if you're willing, let's begin. L'indicatif passé composé. This lesson is split in two parts. Part A, we're going to see how to form l'indicatif passé composé. Part B, we're going to say how to use it. Let's start. How to form it. Let's combine the auxiliary verb avoir ou être, to have or to be, in the present tense with the past participle of a verb in order to form the passé composé. It's as simple as that. Now we need, of course, to identify what is done to create, to make a past participle with a verb. And there are rules for that. And this is what we're covering right now, or in a second. Here, we have an example first. Nous avons cuisiné une baguette. We cooked baguette. How can we not cook that more often? And I mean, home-baked. This is how it's supposed to be done. Nous avons cuisiné une baguette. We cooked baguette. Nous, subject, avons, auxiliary verb to have, cuisiner, past participle of the verb to cook, cuisiner, and then the object. Simple, right? Here it's a bit more complex. In the second sentence, look. Elles sont venues dans la cuisine. They came into the kitchen. Sont venues here has the auxiliary verb to be, which means that the past participles agree in gender and number with the subject. And this is why there's an exclamation point there, with the yellow sign. Warning! Very important. With the auxiliary être, past participles agree in gender and number with the subject, which is not the case of the verb, the auxiliary verb to have, previously quoted here. So, very good to know. And it will change the way you use the passé composé in French. When you come across a verb that is used with être, you absolutely need to pay attention to the way it is conjugated as it comes to the past participle. And now, of course, we have different group verbs in French. So, how do we form the past participle of a verb of group 1? That is, verbs that end in er. We take the stem. So the stem, how do we form the stem? We take the stem, it's just you take the verb and you remove the two last letters of the verb. That's how most of the time you create and have the stem of a verb. So in the case of an er verb, take out the stem, throw it out the window, and what you get is something that you can attach the ending to, the ending of the past participle of verbs of group 1. And in that case, it's the letter E. Et. Parler. J'ai parlé. It also works with verbs like dance, danser. J'ai dansé. And so on and so forth. Group 2 are groups of verbs, is a group of verb with verbs that end in IR. And in that case, well, you're going to have fini. A word of warning here. Some verbs of group 3 also end with IR, so more on that later. Verbs of group 2 always end in IR, so there's no confusion there. Fini, you just add an I with the stem. J'ai choisi also works for the verb choisir. Doesn't work with dire, which is group 3, for example. Okay? And why? Because the ending is RE. And group 3 verbs end in RE most of the time. Doesn't apply to all verbs, but mostly. So you take the stem, and let's take the verb to sell, vendre. You remove the two last letters, and you add a U, and this is how you create the verb in the past participle form. J'ai vendu. It's not going to work all the time. Remember, group 3 verbs are confusing. But as a rule of thumb, it's a great start to admit that that group of verbs usually ends in RE, and you attach the U to it, and you create the past participle. It's going to work most of the time. A reminder, the auxiliary verbs in the present tense. A reminder of how to conjugate avoir. Now, this is very important to review that. If you haven't already mastered this part of the French language, I urge you to do it now. Because if you don't know this, you're going to be very limited in the use of the conjugation system in French. J'ai, tu as, il, elle, on a. Nous avons, vous avez, ils, elles ont. Je suis, tu es, il, elle, on est. Nous sommes, vous êtes, ils, elles sont. Not much to say there. Only it's a good time to study if you haven't already studied these verbs, in the present tense in particular. Now check this. We also have the second part of the lesson, which is how do we use those verbs in a sentence? We use them to express a complete action. Completed action. I'm done. J'ai terminé. Completed, it's done, passé composé. We also use it for emphatic expression. She went to the moon with exclamation point. Elle est allée sur la lune. Yes, she went to the moon is crazy. Emphatic expression, passé composé. It also is good to note that we're going to use the passé composé for verbs in the simple past in English, but also in the present perfect in English. Hence the confusion. Let's take an example. Ils ont sculpté ce merveilleux diamant hier. They carved this wonderful diamond yesterday. Very simple in English, simple past. In French, passé composé, simple past. It gets confusing when we know that we can also use the simple past to translate another tense of the English language, which is the present perfect. This ruby has had a great impact on me. Ce rubis a eu un grand impact sur moi. And it's not necessarily easy to pronounce what I just said, by the way. Ce rubis a eu un grand impact. I'm not sure if you can remember how to keep practicing pronunciation as you go along, mastering French. Pronunciation is key to get not only respect from the people you will be having conversations with, but also in order to get understood. Ce rubis a eu un grand impact sur moi. There's almost no consonant in that sentence. But back to the topic. The topic was, it here translates the present perfect in English. Ce rubis a eu un grand impact sur moi. And here it also translates the simple past. So you're gonna need to rely heavily on context to be able to assess whether you need to use le passé composé or the imparfait in order to translate tenses in the past in French, in order to avoid that confusion between simple past and present perfect. But I'll have you maybe do exercises about this just to check if you can notice the difference, develop that intuition to get natural in translating from one tense to another. There's a link below this video, and I recommend you do the exercise just to find out if you can already form the passé composé, and then we'll have another video about the imparfait, and then a bunch of exercise in order to differentiate and split them apart. But this lesson is about the passé composé, one thing at a time, and this is what we covered today. So let's sum it up. How do we form the passé composé? We combine the auxiliary verb avoir or être with the past participle of a verb, and this is happening in the present in the case of the auxiliary verb. Nous avons cuisiné une baguette. How do we form the past participle? This, the first question generated another one. How do we form the past participle? Well, here Group 1 verbs, you add E or the E sound in French. Group 2, you add an I. Group 3, you add a U to the stem. And the different U's. Express a complete action. I'm done. J'ai terminé. Use for emphatic expression, something that is really emotional. Translates simple past, translates present perfect. Click the link down below. I recommend you do. And I also hope that you appreciate that journey, that French language learning journey, because it's a joy really to learn languages. And the French language is obviously not the easiest language on the planet, but it's also the language of love. So why not appreciate this wonderful, wonderful journey that will hopefully open doors, and I'm sure they will open doors in your life. Thank you for watching. The link is below the video to complete the exercise. See you next time.